Here. I would like to introduce today's speaker. This is Professor Chris Brown, a prolific scholar in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies, and one of our most accomplished faculty members within the Center for Latin American Studies. He's here today to present on his year living and working in Brazil. We should also note that Professor Chris Brown's Merienda lecture is coming a day after winning the 2015 George and Eleanor Woodyard International Educational Award. Please join us in congratulating Professor Brown on his outstanding leadership. With that, please join me in welcoming Professor Chris Brown.
All right, thank you very much. I am long overdue for a merienda, so I need to attend more and also present. This is a great chance for us to meet, for me especially today, more informally, and talk about the experience that I had in Brazil, both professionally and personally. People ask me all the time, how was Brazil? What are you supposed to say after living there and going through this experience? And I just have kind of a stock answer, so forgive me, but it was an amazing experience both personally and professionally. And I kind of leave it at that unless there's more time to go on. Well, today's the time to go on a little bit more. A year living and working in Brazil, and I want to move through this as quickly as possible to leave plenty of time for questions. But I want to emphasize how important it is to prepare for when any international work that you do. Be prepared. Learn the language, which I know many of you are. It will open so many doors when you arrive and are able to communicate and express humor and understand humor and be able to get your appointments and really get the most you can out of your experience and also contribute to the experience of the people that you're meeting. Make those in-country connections. Think of every time you get a chance to travel as a way to make connections and network so that the next time that you have an opportunity to go, you have a place to start and even move further every time that you visit. Both when I say move further along in your research, but also visit other places and just continue to expand your knowledge and your network. Apply for funding always. Always be on the lookout for some opportunity to get funding that you need to support a trip. Once you get one piece of money, you can often leverage it to get more. And all you have to do sometimes, even in tight budgetary times, is just ask. Because people, various departments and units around campus have pots of money that if, I can't afford to support your whole trip, but how about $100? Hey, take it. It's $100 you didn't have. And then say, I've got this department and this department supporting me. Can I also, ask history for a little or whatever? You can actually put enough together to pay for that $1,500 plane ticket or $1,200, whatever it is. And of course, time away. In my case, it was a sabbatical. So I have to apply ultimately to the Board of Regents and the state of Kansas and say, yeah, give me 4 months of my regular salary, but let me be gone from KU for an entire year to accomplish these sets of goals. And so that's a whole process that you have to start almost a whole year ahead of when you want to leave. And also for Fulbrights, that's basically a year-long process. So people applying that just applied for Fulbrights now are not going to go for several months on their particular trips. For us, moving a whole family, it's getting finances and our house in order. And this is where the division of labor in our household made it possible. My wife, Denise, basically said, you get the money for us to go. I will take care of the house. I will take care of our finances. So it was a great division of labor. I love my partner in all this. And then I don't know about other countries in Latin America because I haven't traveled to them all, but for Brazil, please apply early because it can be difficult. And depending on what your home embassy is that you have to work with, the consulate that's in your jurisdiction, they may have different rules. So be patient for that process. So I just wanted to emphasize preparation for anything that you do going ahead. So where were we? Google Earth is my favorite because it's the quickest way to make some maps. So here's South America. Campinas is right here, about an hour and a half north of the metropolitan area of São Paulo, which, as you know, is one of the largest urban centers in the world. You can actually see it, right, in Google Earth. It's so large. And this is, I'm not going to go into more detail about the history of the area or anything like that, maybe for questions later, but let's zoom in now on Campinas. So you can see this is the greater Campinas metropolitan area, 1 million inhabitants in this particular area. And if you zoom into, I can't even point out exactly where it is, I don't have the roads on here to orient me, but basically up in the northern part of this image, then as we zoom into the city, is can you see the campus here? Unicampi. And so it's arranged in a series of concentric circles. It's a fairly new campus. I can't remember when it was established, but definitely a much newer campus with this opportunity to do some kind of unique design here. I was in this particular area right here of campus and have very fond memories and miss the amount of time that I had to head out about 4:30 and take a nice run up and down these amazing hills and everything along the sugarcane fields that surround the area. The lake up here in the upper right was a nice ecological park with a nice mile track. These are important moments in one sabbatical when you're away from the daily work. To be able to take the time to collect your thoughts and exercise, it was really important for me. So we're going to go to a road that's off to this side of Unicampi, which is the State University of Campinas. And we're going to go, it's called the Estrada da Roja. And along this estrada leaving town, you can see, what do we have here? Lots of rural areas. Some of the larger areas have sugarcane. Sugarcane is just everywhere in São Paulo state right now. But a tremendous amount of hortaliça or vegetable production in fairly large plots. Lots of herbicides, lots of pesticides, lots of fertilizer, but a very productive region. And so, those collards that are growing on the side of the road while you're taking your kid to soccer practice, it's probably going to be on your dinner table the following weekend, or one of its relatives, right, in the field. This particular area on these outskirts have been part of a land grab that really goes on quite a bit in Brazil. And many Brazilians lament the process because it's not very well regulated. So what a developer will do is go to new areas like this along an artery that leaves the town. This is just a 2-lane road leaving the campus area down here. And they will arrange to own that land, maybe not even paying for it, but they will arrange to build on it, and then they will sell these lots. These are all closed, gated communities, except for this one right here is actually one that just has, surveillance vehicles going around all the time. But all the rest of this is a very large gated community where there's only a few entrance points, there's security guards, and most of the people living in these areas are upper middle class to upper class Brazilians living in these areas. And we were very lucky with the exchange rate at the time, almost 4-to-1, the Brazilian real to the dollar. We were able to rent a place in one of these condominios right here for the same that we pay for our mortgage here near Dadbury Park. So and we got someone to rent our house here. It was a perfect arrangement. And the issue that we found out with everyone when you started reading the email list from all the group that lived in that particular condominio was this incredible fight in order for them to get their titles to the land. These are people that had built over the last several years their homes here, some of them million-reais homes, and had no title to the land. Why? Because they never went through the proper process of actually purchasing the land, having the prefeitura, the municipal government sanction this development. And so for homeowners in this particular area, it just is a terrible mess for them to even get proper documentation. A lot of the areas in this particular part of the neighborhood They call the contract that they do have that says they own the house simply a contrato de gaveta, just a contract that's kept in a drawer. And so it really puts people in a very difficult position because they cannot use their house for any kind of collateral then, because they can't show that they actually own the land. So that was a very interesting introduction for us to a problem that Brazilians face in unfortunately much more difficult and ways in more rural areas where the way in which land is acquired for large agricultural production, for example, many peasant organizations fighting against irregularities because they're being pushed off land that they, for decades or even longer, have farmed that land and gotten their sustenance. We experienced just a small part of that in an urban setting, and so it was very interesting for us. Okay, so this is our house, and it's decorated for Halloween. In the gated communities, they're adopting American traditions of doing Halloween and doing trick-or-treating and decorating their homes. We were not going to be outdone by our Brazilian neighbors, so off we went to the mall to buy, skeletons and cobwebs and balloons and whatnot to decorate the home. The kids dressed up, made their own costumes, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of that tradition in a completely different place, like Brazil. So again, a lot of what I want to talk about is related to the family and kids, but it's all part of my own growing awareness of life in Brazil, because none of us had ever spent this kind of time with a family in Brazil. So school for the kids, what are we going to do? A lot of people said, you're not sending your kids to the American school in Campinas? It's a very good school. And we had to explain, we don't have the amount of money required to send our kids to the American school. If I'm not mistaken, it's $1,000 to $2,000 per child per month at the American school. And we don't have that kind of funds. And so we also wanted the experience where the kids are thrown into Brazilian society and truly learn Portuguese. And so this is my son Jason, who is 13, and my son Connor. And we sent them to this, what is often called a escola alternativa, an alternative school, where there's much less pressure on testing for the exams that the students have to take in order to get into a university, and much less flexibility in terms of the way in which the children learn. This is based on educational philosophy from a French pedagogical expert named Freinet. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but you have. So it was very experiential. The kids were always doing hands-on projects, always involved in helping out around the school, rather than come festival time, rather than going and having parents buy a bunch of stuff and bring it to the school. The kids just took whatever they could and put things together, be it a mural or a set of instruments or whatever. They would just put the kids to work and in that way learn. And so for my sons to be involved in that was really, really good, because they were learning the language while doing things, where if they were simply sitting down, reading a book or listening to someone tell them the way the world was, they would have had a very different learning experience. It worked very well for us. Was it frustrating for the kids? Yes, incredibly frustrating. There were so many evenings of tears, but they both came out of it very well and are fluent speakers of Portuguese. Jason is a fluent texter in Portuguese. He's still in contact with his friends back at Escola Curumim. And it was a fantastic experience. The environment here, very aconchegante, very welcoming, warm and welcoming, and just a place that just sparks creativity and the feeling of being involved in a community. Here's one of the festival days we had at school. The kids do projects and explain things. So here's Jason with a team of his peers that put together some information on Foursquare, actually explaining the rules of a game in Portuguese. lots of festivals. This is, I believe, the spring festival, and of course they also had the big Festa Junina, which I'll talk about later. I really like this about festivals in Brazil. At a school, here we are at a school. You would never have an espetinho on the left of meat, and let alone enjoy a cold beer. But it certainly added to the environment there, and spending an entire afternoon at the kids' school with parents and watching the kids play was a very enjoyable experience. This is my wife Denise, in case you wondered. So we wanted to get the kids involved in activities as well. They're both into sports. My colleague at Embrapa, which is the equivalent of the USDA in Brazil, he wasn't a member of this exclusive club, but his son was a badminton player at the club. To belong to these clubs, I don't even want to think of what the monthly fee is, in addition to your initiation fee. This is the very upper crust of Campinas society at this particular club, and my colleague, his son, played badminton. He's an excellent badminton player, an amazing badminton player in the Brazilian rankings. They allow children to come and play if they're good and can help contribute to the success of the clubs, of the teams in the club. And these are called militantes, militants. I don't know how you would translate that into English in this case, but that's what you were called if you were a non-dues paying member of a team. You're a militante. And so, ringers. So Jason was very quickly accepted onto the basketball team at his age, and quickly got involved in playing. I was even allowed to go in and play pickup games now and then with the adults, which was a lot of fun. So again, a big challenge for Jason, although he had a language of basketball that he could rely on. And of course, many of the kids speak English because of their schooling that they're going to, and they wanted to speak English with Jason all the time, which frustrated him at the beginning. I want to do Portuguese, and they're just speaking English to me. So here's Jason after many steals and then a layup on the other end. They won their league championship, which was, I was just so proud, right? This is his coach, Leandro, and Marcão is in the back here, who plays professionally in Brazil. So these are people that have played on professional clubs in Brazil. So for Jason and me to be a part of that, it was really, really amazing and rewarding. And Jason got to travel with the team because the league is kind of all around São Paulo. So it was a lot of fun. Connor did not want to do basketball. That wasn't his thing. He wanted to do baseball. Before we get to baseball, I want you to look at this picture of the club that Jason and I belong to, right, as militantes. Can you see some indicators of a fancy club? Right, large fields. What are these? These brown squares? Clay tennis courts. So it was very common that there were Brazilian national tennis championships being played at one time or another here. Soccer fields and this is an equestrian. The roots of this club is equestrianism. So to see the horses all around, and then of course the swimming pools. So, and it's all enclosed by a wall and security. And then you notice right next to it here, very different density of houses, right? A very, very tight density of houses. Any idea what this might be? What the socioeconomic profile of this place is? Extremely different, right? Otherwise you'd see larger lots, you'd see swimming pools. This is a favela right next to the exclusive club, where one night after practice, again, through these personal experiences, introduced to aspects of Brazil that I'd never experienced before, never having lived in a big urban area like this, there had been police had gone into the favela during the day trying to arrest drug traffickers. And unfortunately, a dear old woman from the neighborhood was shot by the police in the whole process. The favela erupted in protest, and while we were in practice, had come out and closed off this main artery here. which is the main way into downtown Campinas. And also, just coming around here, there's an exclusive shopping center, one of the ritziest shopping centers in Brazil, just on the other side of these fields here, had completely cut this off. There were helicopters flying around, and Jason and I are leaving basketball practice. What is going on? And I knew the situation above where those helicopters were. We got into our car, and luckily, coming out the road here, there was no traffic going this way because it had been all cut off this way. And so we were able to get out and head home. Sad occurrence, but part of the incredible contrast, geographic contrast, social contrast that you can see in an urban area like Brazil, like Campinas. People in Campinas told us time and again, you live in an incredibly violent city. And some statistics support that. But there's definitely a feeling, if I were to communicate from the people that we always talk to on a daily basis, always cautioning us about, looking around, making sure you're smart about where you're parking your car, not being out at certain hours, not going to certain places. And so that was part of our life there. Luckily, nothing happened to us. We were very lucky, but it's certainly something that's always there, living in a place like Campinas. This is a shot I got off Google from the favela, Brandina, in Campinas. Now here's another, what in the heck is this?
Baseball field?
Baseball fields. 10 minutes from our home at the edge of town is the Colonia Tozan. The Brazilians are not known for their baseball, right? You don't see many baseball players from Brazil in the US. Paulo Orlando is an exception on the Kansas City Royals. And there's a couple others. Brazil received baseball from Japanese immigration, from Japan, which began in the early 1900s, in part to help provide labor for the coffee plantations that were throughout São Paulo. And this area also used to be a very large coffee plantation. And so eventually in the 1950s, the Japanese that lived in this particular part of Campinas were able to acquire a piece of land in order to have an association that would support their culture, their ways. They had a school there. And of course, one of the most important activities for them to maintain their culture was baseball. And so at all the major cities, not necessarily major cities, but wherever there was a strong concentration of Japanese immigrants, you'll find baseball played by these various associations. So this dates back to the 1950s. There were people there, I'd found out about this by colleagues at Unicamp who were Japanese descent, who had played baseball as a child at Tozan, and when I told them that my son Connor was a baseball player, they put me in touch with Sensei Shibuya. They called him Sensei, teacher, Shibuya. And he said, come on out, join us. And so we did. And we spent many, many hours on these fields playing baseball, traveling to other cities in the state of São Paulo to play, even near São Paulo, so it's kind of exciting, the kids taking a bus through São Paulo to go to some of the clubs there. But it was just an amazing introduction to Japanese culture. Just to give you an example, at the end of a game, we don't do that in the United States. We don't even join them out there to greet there's Sensei Shibuya here. We had this amazing introduction to Japanese culture. And also a very different socioeconomic class. The kids that were attracted to that particular baseball club most of them were from neighborhoods in the surrounding area. So much more modest income. Parents that were even worried about their kids and wanting the Japanese discipline and teaching ideas of cooperation and respect that they feel is really missing in the soccer clubs that they could normally send their kids to. So looking to Japanese culture as a way to get their kids on the right path was why a lot of the non-Brazilians, the non-Japanese descendant people were playing. But as you take a look, it's kind of half and half. Here's Connor right here, right there, and then Jason photobombing in the back. After one of their first tournament games, practices go on for 8 hours during the weekend. So 4 hours on Saturday afternoon and 4 hours Sunday morning. This was a shock, right? So Connor's used to the 1 hour practice with the rec league, with his team here, and then everybody leaves and goes home. Well, that's not the case here. This is a community. And so it's coming together, it's preparing food for the children, it's having maybe a churrasco after practice, which I loved because it had this Brazilian-Japanese flair to it. Delicious food, wonderful conversation, amazing stories of people who came, their parents, most of them, came to Brazil. So they are second generation, but still plenty of elderly Brazilians that are Japanese descendant that barely speak Portuguese that are there. And at the club every weekend. Some of them even playing baseball. There was a group called the Oldie Boys that was a group of men that were in their 70s that played every week. And they were a lot of fun to be around. We couldn't communicate very well, but because we didn't speak a common language, but we got to play baseball, and that was really an amazing experience. Baseball as being something that brought us together with a totally different aspect of Brazilian society that I had scarcely known. Here's a movie just showing you. I took this at one of our tournaments. This is a group behind of a group of Japanese descendant kids from Peru that were there for a tournament. So I got to speak Spanish with them. It was fun. This just gives you a little sense of what Connor's team was like. These kids were fun. These were really big deals. I don't want to drill this into the ground too much, but it was just such a different experience. We don't do this for our kids at baseball tournaments and basketball tournaments. This is the opening ceremony of one tournament near São Paulo. So the kids are all back here with flags that once the music starts, they'll come in and be introduced. At the end of the tournament, here's how they celebrated. Stars and Stripes Forever. So an amazing big deal. We had our just like life in general and sports in general, we had our victories and our defeats. This is a victory where Connor pitched the entire game. And he's not a pitcher. He learned to be a pitcher in Brazil from Sensei Shibuya, who was a pitcher, and taught him everything he knows about pitching today. And Connor's a lot of fun to watch. Festa Caipira Japonesa. So this is the Caipira festival that they would have around the Festa Junina in Brazil. Very briefly, think of it as a harvest festival in the winter months. And so as winter comes. And so I, as a member of Tozan, we became members of Tozan. We could afford that mensalidade. And we get our shirts on, decorate the entire place, and are able to take part in both Brazilian and Japanese culture. So here's the Brazilian part. Whoops. So we had typical scenes like this. That's your typical Festa Junina Brazilian music. And then the local Japanese drumming group. So this was an amazing mixture of things. Many weekends out there. This is actually Tommy. Mother's Brazilian, father is American, who did his degree in Latin American Studies at UCLA, went to Brazil and basically ended up staying there, and now is a manager of a chemical plant in Indaiatuba. So our sons got to play together and speak English and Portuguese and have all that mix and share baseball together over the years. I was third base, the sensei on third base, often strategizing with Connor about what we're going to do in the next play. This was an amazing experience for me. I was so taken in by this community, coached the kids. At the very end of the season, when we played our last game, they all lined up, and I had to stand out there in front of them while they all together, arigato gozaimashita, and then they attacked me. And this was caught on tape here, and it really is emblematic of that experience for me. And then the kids played soccer as well. Connor ended up being a goalie of all things. He's not very big, but he really wanted to be goalie, and his coaches just loved how into it he was and how he paid attention and respected the coaches and everything. And then Jason took off kind of as a defender and really enjoyed that. They're not playing soccer anymore, but I've heard at recess, you don't recognize them very much anymore. They came back with some serious skills, which was a lot of fun. There's plenty of holidays and vacation in Brazil, and we saved our money. We spent a lot of our money visiting all the 5 official regions of Brazil, the north, the south, etc. And so just very briefly, we went to Bonito in Mato Grosso, which was just fabulous for the kids. Lots of nature, climbing through trees, doing snorkeling in this incredibly clear water and seeing all kinds of fish. Even in São Paulo State, there's plenty of amazing places to visit. This is right near Botucatu, São Paulo, where there's all kinds of cachoeiras or waterfalls to hike to and visit. Absolutely amazing. We were in the Amazon, and the kids had fun getting to know some of the local wildlife right there. Of course, we were at Foz do Iguaçu in Paraná, in the south. And again, adventures in São Paulo were always fun. And yes, we did go to the Olympics. We were there, and we're not as well organized as we probably should have been. We should have thought more about what other sports we'd like to visit, take part in, because we were focused on basketball. We wanted to see the U.S. basketball team play and had tickets to the first semifinal game. You can't buy tickets to see a team. You buy just a game. And we thought we'd be sure to see the U.S. in the first semifinal game of the night, because the U.S. always plays the first semifinal game of the night. And it did up until the night before the game when they switched. They had the second part of the bracket play first. And it was terrible.
So who did you watch?
We got to see Serbia and Australia. But so the basketball was great. We got to watch the U.S. game on the giant screen out in the Coke Plaza there outside the Carioca Arena. So it was fine. But at Rio Centro, at the Centro de Convenções, we were able to see badminton. My goodness, we were introduced to badminton a little bit more by our friends who played so much at this club at a really high level. But when you see these people play, we watched a couple matches, one of which was the gold medal match between Spain and India. And India had never had anyone at this level play. This is the women's. Unfortunately for India, Spain won, and I was just blown away by the athleticism of badminton players. These down here tell you how fast the slam was. So, was it, I can't remember in kilometers per hour, but we calculated it was something like 200 miles per hour. Some of the slams are really amazing. There we are outside the Carioca Arena after watching our basketball game, and you can see Connor is just rather go home. This is one day before we came back to the U.S. So Jason was happy about it. I was happy about it. It was an exciting time. Okay, I did do some research while I was there. Let me briefly tell you about that so we can get to some questions. And this is going to be very brief. With my continued travels to Brazil, I get more and more collaborators all the time. There's a group in Maranhão at the Federal University there of anthropologists that are learning more and more about using GIS and GPS to map human activity in their work. And I and a few others are there to help them think about, well, how can you use mapping and things like that in your anthropological work? Because what they're trying to understand is this area called the Lençóis Maranhenses, which is now a national park. They're trying to understand more about how people for decades have been using this land. When it was formed into a national park, they didn't take into account at all the fact that peasant peoples were using this land, the fishing for grazing and all that. A episode of Naked and Afraid was filmed here. It's that kind of environment. And it's become this national park. And these people park issues that keep cropping up in places like Brazil is something that Marcelo Nakashima here, who is a PhD visiting student working with me from USP in São Paulo, these are the kinds of issues that he's working on with some of his work in São Paulo State, and also thinking about ways we can collaborate on this particular people park issue going on in Maranhão. We did lots of field work. This is my colleague Alex Coutinho from Embrapa. Most of our work is focused on traveling throughout Mato Grosso to visit as many different agricultural areas that we can to do what we call ground referencing in order to use satellite data to map agricultural land uses. You have to know what's on the ground and mark that. And so we go around with a tablet that is GPS enabled. And so it's got, imagine, you've got your Google Earth going on in your car. Well, imagine having an interface where you can mark a point on it and then enter into a database, oh, I see soy there, or oh, I see cotton there. And then we use that data to train mathematical models to take data from satellites and classify it and say, oh, that's soy, that's cotton, that's forest, that's pasture, etc. So it took us up all the way into northern Mato Grosso. This is inside the Xingu Indigenous Reserve, where the Kayapó have an arrangement to transport people across the Xingu for a charge, for a pedágio. This shows you in Mato Grosso, this is the only color I could get on here. Can you see this giant green blob here? This is just an example of all the particular GPS points that we were able to get in a week of field work driving around Mato Grosso. Driving around Mato Grosso is exciting. This is an area with this huge commodity boom. So there are trucks moving products just constantly up and down these roads, even when it's not harvest season, because they're just transporting things from the various silos and things to places where they're going to be processed or transported further. So this gives you an idea of how big Mato Grosso is. Marcelo says, it looks about like the size of Texas. It could be a little bit bigger, but it's an enormous state where you're getting this huge agricultural boom. Those of you that were there yesterday at the presentation saw this. This is the product of our work, of having gone around the state for several years, getting ground reference data, but also working with farmer groups who will look on an image and find their field, draw their field on the image, and then tell us the history of their land use on that particular plot over time. We've gone back in history then, all the way to 2001 with some of the ground reference in order to be able to classify each year. And we're mainly interested, we get our forest data from Brazil's INPE, the National Institute of Space Research in Brazil. They already produce a data set each year showing exactly what forest is remaining in the Amazon. And then the rest we're not worrying about classifying. It's mainly cerrado, savanna, or pastures. What we're really interested in is these yellows, these reds, these blues. These are various, some of the major cropping regimes that you have in Brazil in this highly mechanized, highly technified, high input, high output industrial agriculture. This is the situation in 2001. I'll start the animation here, and you can see how the main growing regions of Mato Grosso just explode over time. And instead of planting just one soy single crop, which is the yellow, you're seeing soy double crops, mainly with corn, but also soy double crops with cotton. You'll see some green showing up here. You see that? And you're going to see some other green over here as well crop up in the area.
Do they need irrigation water to do this?
No.
Crop?
No, ideally no, right? This is the great thing about Brazil, is that one of the most important inputs for agriculture, water, just falls from the sky. Problem is it doesn't fall the same every year. And the more we deforest these areas, the less and less they're going to get when you start considering the recycling that's done between the vegetation and the atmosphere with water in some of these areas. So you can see, we can toggle back and forth now between 2001 and 2014 here. I'm showing you here the indigenous reserves in Mato Grosso. So you can see where there's a lot of them in forest, but a lot of them as well are just in the Cerrado, right? Peoples that live in the Cerrado. So you can see how right up to the border of the Xingu Indigenous Reserve is, we were right about here where we crossed the Xingu, right there, when we did our field work. Just an incredible expansion and intensification of agriculture, planting more than one crop per year on the same piece of land. In areas where they do irrigate, near a river, where they just pull water in from the river, 3 crops a year. And we did see some center pivots as well, but they're not very prominent in the area at all. A little bit about campus life. This is one of the entrances to Unicamp, just to give you a feel for what it's like. This is within the campus, they have Embrapa Informatica, which is the federal government office. They have an arrangement with Unicamp, which facilitates exchange of information. The researchers that are here can be on people's PhD committees and things like that. And the work that I did with the Agricultural Engineering School on remote sensing of agriculture and working with people trying to understand the socioeconomic drivers of ethanol production and things like that in the area is just across the street from this. So it's an ideal place for me to develop some of this work because of these 2 institutes located right next to each other. During the second semester, my Fulbright funding ran out. The Fulbright funding now is only 4 months. So I had 4 months of salary from KU. I had 4 months salary from Fulbright. And then what am I going to do for the other 4 months? Once I got there, the other researcher that I worked with, Jansley Rocha, said, well, let's write a FAPESP grant. FAPESP is the São Paulo Research Foundation. A very small percentage of every financial transaction in São Paulo goes into a science fund that is controlled entirely by FAPESP, controlled by researchers themselves in the science fields in Brazil. Marcelo is here on some...
It's 1%.
1% of all financial transactions goes to the science fund. And so it supported me to continue with my research, but also do a graduate seminar with students who came from geography and the agricultural engineering school, and then another one from an interdisciplinary program called, well, it doesn't matter what it's called, but a human environment interdisciplinary program, took part in my seminar on political ecology and land change science. And I really emphasized them getting hands-on stuff, doing projects. They had to write consultant reports, applying some of the concepts that they'd learned from our readings about political ecology as an approach to the study of people and the environment in the development process. So really fantastic people. to meet. Here they're doing a project. Can you see that? Whoops. Can you see that? The BR3. Do you see this BR163? That's one little project we did. That's a highway that's going from northern Mato Grosso up to Santarém on the Amazon River in order so that the soybeans can flow north by truck instead of south by truck all the way to ports near São Paulo and further south. The idea being this will reduce transportation costs and make soybeans, if you just do the balance, much more valuable. Moving on really quickly, strikes in Brazil are a regular occurrence, and especially in the universities. I can't imagine the students, how they have to deal with this regular occurrence, because it completely throws off the semester and when you're going to graduate, if you thought about graduating, if you had hoped to graduate. And so this happened in Unicamp as well, although there was a disagreement as to whether certain departments would participate in the strike, which, as you can imagine, created even more tension among faculty, among students, and it was not the happiest of times at Unicamp. Some students were even barring professors from teaching, from basically, crossing the strike line. And in our particular case at the agricultural school, people did not go on strike, and we're off on one part of campus where it's kind of isolated. And so for me, on a day-to-day basis, it wasn't a problem until you try to get onto campus and there's a protest. So, and this gets us into Did you hear that? Impeachment. Impeachment, what are they referring to? The impeachment. Wait a minute. This is about striking at the university. What does this have to do with impeachment? I could go on for several hours. We could dissect this. But it was all tied up in the issue of the impeachment. Whether people thought that was just or not, because they tied it as well to the way things were being run in the university as well. The major complaint at the university was administrators keeping, when they move into running the university, they were maintaining their salaries as full professors, but also getting an entirely new salary for being the administrator of the university. And the regular workers, janitors, professors, and everything were saying, that's not fair to get a double salary when the rest of us are being cut. Our budgets are being cut in these difficult economic times. The impeachment entered into all this. And I'm only relating what I've been told by some of the people in some of the more contentious departments. Some departments felt like they were being influenced by even people in the party, in the Workers' Party, to raise a ruckus at the time of the impeachment, to try to put some kind of brakes on what they felt was a very unjust process of Dilma being impeached for issues that had nothing to do, really, with breaking any crime, was the argument. And having someone who was democratically elected by such a margin be thrown out for these reasons was hitting at people's sense of living in a democratic society. And so people were really divided along these lines of saying, one line saying, just get these buggers out, and on another saying, clearly there are things that aren't right, but you don't throw out a president like this in a democracy. So it was a sad time as well to be in Brazil and see people that I knew struggling with this issue and just not feeling in control or happy about their situation at all. And then put on top of that, the rise of Trump in the United States brought on many interesting conversations that we would have every day, picking the kids up at school, parents saying, what's going on with Trump and what's going on with Hillary? But at the same time, having this process occurring in Brazil. So in sum, it was an amazing time to be there professionally and personally. I learned so much more about what it's like to be a Brazilian. I'll never know for sure because I'm not, I never will be. I'm not from Brazil. But having this time to spend in such a deep way with people on so many different levels, from playing sports with my kids to the conversations we would have at the university and at the school and at the grocery store. Having that day-to-day experience is nothing that I expect to ever be able to top. These are dear people working with in the field at Unicampi. Made some new friends and colleagues at the National Space Institute in San Jose dos Campos. And we also, this is Lisa Rausch. I don't know if anybody remembers Lisa. She was my student in the MA program here and also the PhD program in geography. And she was in town because she does field work in Brazil still in a postdoc that she has at the University of Wisconsin. And I said, party. So everybody here, every single person here has been in Lawrence and has spent time at KU and still has their Kansas Hill Yes sixth man t-shirts and things that they can wear to join us at a KU reunion at Unicampi. And so next time we have this, Marcelo, you can wear your shirt. Well, let me end there and thank you guys for coming today and take any questions. Got a few minutes.
What did your wife think? I didn't hear much about her experience.
Yeah, Denise was able to take a leave of absence from her job here, not a sabbatical, but her boss, Mabel Rice, said, why don't you just take a year off? Let's not sever ties. And so she's back at work there. She really loved being there because she didn't have to work. Her job really was to keep things going at home. The kids needed a lot of extra help with their homework, as you can imagine. She speaks Portuguese fluently. And was able to, again, deal with all our finances and just keep that ship running while I was at work most days at Unicampi. The kids went to school, the kids go to school in Brazil mainly just half days. So you're either in the morning session from 7 in the morning till noon, and then the other crowd in the afternoon. And so it was mainly being with the boys during the morning, taking them to some activities. They had their soccer and things. But then in the afternoon, getting them to school, picking them up at school, picking me up, hoping that the strike hasn't blocked the road and all that kind of thing. But she really had a nice time off. Was able to spend a lot more time exercising. She's going to do the half marathon on Saturday, which would have been impossible before going to Brazil. So for her, I think if she were here, she'd say it was a very rewarding time as well.
What kind of social life did she have?
Separate from the most of our interactions with people were, neighbors in the condominio and just daily seeing them and interacting with them. There were events as well at the condominio. They organized neighborhood parties and things. We would see all of our friends at the school. So that was every single day at times to spend a good 30 minutes hanging out with people and talking before you picked your kids up. Other than that, we were pretty busy. In the evenings, getting the kids getting their homework done, helping them with their homework. Try reading Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth in Portuguese. That was a challenge, but we did it. Jason did it with our help. We got through it. Connor read an abridged version of Moby Dick for his 5th grade class. I mean, who knew? So there was plenty to do, but we had friends over a lot. We got invited to people's houses a lot. It was really great.
Do they have any opportunities for our students to go there for a semester? Or do we have a
Yeah, I was just explaining to, and I can't remember his name here, who's studying Portuguese with Dovis. We now have an agreement with Unicampi to exchange students, so students from there can come here and not pay any tuition because they don't pay any in Brazil, and take classes and get them transferred back to Unicampi. And the same, you would just pay your regular KU tuition, but you can go to Brazil and have all the rights and privileges of being a student at Unicampi and get your courses transferred to KU. So that now is in force. And so if you're interested in learning more about life in Campinas and what it would be like going to school there, I'd be happy to talk with people. It really is a great place to study. It's an excellent university. It's not far from São Paulo, so you can have that experience. It's not far from any of these other beautiful areas that I showed you. It's away from the beach, but 2-3 hour drive, you can get there. Algo mais? All right, well, thank you all.